This is section 2 of the Axis training program for core functionality. Today is going to go over new hire, talking about the employee demographics and payroll demographics, the events or employee actions menu, attendance plans, and the payroll process. So in this session, we start with the clients by taking them to the new hire process. Okay, this is familiar to you. There are no idiosyncrasies or tricks with this program or with this process. So I will leave you to explaining and walking the client through the new hire wizard, which is rather self-explanatory. You can also, after that, discuss the self-service new hire and all that that entails. Once the new hire process has been gone over with the client to their satisfaction, the next thing in the process is going to be talking about the employee demographics and payroll demographics. So let's close this out. Click on employees, going to select one. And now, again, since these items are self-explanatory, all we really want to do at this point is walk the client through each of the tabs up top for the demographics of the employee, and then give descriptions and talk about the each element within these items. Again, these are self-explanatory, so just walk them through what they're going to find here. Further attention should be made here in the payroll tab. As we are talking, of course, make sure that they understand all of the functionality within the payroll setup box, the setup, the taxes, the exemptions, and the rates of pay. So this is going to be critical for them as they are using the system. They should be extremely familiar with this area here, so they'll be able to see all of the pay frequencies, pay items, things like that, the taxes, of course, where they have the residents and non-residents for income tax, as well as SUTA tax. Okay. Have the client pay a little bit more attention with deductions, adding a new record for inserting a deduction, simply dropping down the list box, selecting the deduction in question. That's going to bring over a lot of information that they previously set up for the deduction code itself, such as the amount and the maximum amount, but that can be changed here on an employee by employee basis. They can also change the start and the end date for these items as necessary. What they'll simply have to do here is verify this information, make sure they select active, inactive, or one time for this deduction. Now, if this is a child support order, they can then put the case number and the petitioner, and if that deduction code has been set as a garnishment, these items will be printed on the check stub. Okay, now one other thing I will point out from a support standpoint, if a deduction has not had a payee assigned to it, it will not appear in the list to select. So if a client calls up and says, hey, I created a deduction, but it doesn't show up in here, 99.9% of the time, it's going to be because they did not complete the setup of the deduction code itself and add a payee to that deduction. So as soon as that's done, that item should then show up in the description of the list box. Okay, the other area to pay a little bit more attention to is going to be direct deposits and setting up multiple direct deposit accounts, routing an account number, obviously, the account type they can select here, the amount to be deposited, and then the pre-note with a date associated with it. Excuse me. The amount, if there is only one direct deposit account, then use a very large number, 99999.99, something like that, so that all of the checks or all of the net pay will be deposited into this account. If they have multiple direct deposits, multiple accounts, then what they want to do is for each one, make sure they know how much is going to be deposited. If they have two, they can put in the specific item or the specific amount that they want deducted in the first, insert that. When they create the second, that is when they will again use the 9999.99. So the remainder of the net pay after that 150 or whatever it is that they specified previously goes into this account. Okay, and that's really it. So just continue on with explaining to them all the fields that they will find under the tabs, and that will cover the employee demographics and payroll demographics. Okay, once that information has been given to the client and they are comfortable with what they have seen and what you have talked about, then I move on to the employee actions menu, where we find all of the HR duties that they will be performing. Now, these are straightforward. These are self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go through and detail every page, as you know them very well. There's not a whole lot of complexity, so just go through each one of these. Termination, rehire, the job review, transfer, job change, leave of absence, life change event, and so on, just so that they can see what these are, so they can see the screen and what data to input. Also let them know that these are real-time events. So the terminations, such as termination and rehire, as soon as they click the submit button, those elements are then created for the employees. The termination happens, the rehire happens as well. The termination should also immediately revoke any security access as soon as it's done. Okay. One other thing to cover with the client when talking about the department transfer or a job change, make sure that they understand that they need to fill out the page in its entirety before they've clicked the submit button, because that data then becomes their new reality. If they have areas that they have left blank, then that data will be blank as they update the records. So just make sure that they have filled out all of the appropriate data completely. Okay, so again, this is very straightforward. Just show them the screens, walk through the processes with them, and in terms of the data that they have to enter in, and that's really it. Okay. Next is going to be attendance plan setup. So let's go to other and attendance plans. Okay, attendance plans. Creating attendance plans for a company, click on Add New Record, and you're able to fill out all of the specific business rules that are going to govern any PTO and time off plans that a company has. Start with the plan code. That's going to be whatever you want it to be, one string of letters or numbers, no spaces, punctuation, or special characters. Followed by the plan name. That's going to be whatever they want it to be. That will show up on reports, it'll show up on the screen, and also on check stubs. Okay, the plan description, they can copy and paste a little descriptor of the plan if they like, or type out some verbiage here so that the employees and the employers know what this plan is for. Okay, active, the active indicator is going to tell the system that this is an active plan and should be calculated whenever somebody has this item in question and the payrolls are run. The second element is going to be payroll-based. When this is selected, then this payroll or this PTO plan will calculate its time when the payroll is run. That is also going to display a calculation method that's going to be assigned to the payroll-based plan. So if we drop this down, what we want to do is talk to the client about the base way that we do this, the default way, which is the pay period rate. Okay, the pay period rate is calculated based on the eligible total hours for the year for a specific tier, divided by the number of pay periods the person has in their company. Okay, so if a person is eligible for 80 hours of PTO per year and they're a weekly payroll, we will take that 80 hours divided by 52, and that is the number of hours accrued every time the payroll is run. Okay. Another default method that we have is going to be the eligible total hours on the plan period. Okay, when the plan period is selected down below, the entirety of the annual eligible hours for the person's tier will be granted to them as soon as that plan reaches its period, either the January 1st for a calendar year or the anniversary of their hire date, at which point nothing will accrue until that plan rolls over again and everything recalculates. Okay, we also have 3 additional ways to calculate these. Pay period rate times the hours worked. What that's going to do is it's going to take the base hours as if you had selected the pay period rate, and it's going to further divide those hours down to an hourly level. So it will calculate how much time will accrue per hour worked. We have pay period rate times the base hours. So it's going to do the same thing, but it is only going to use hours from pay codes that have been marked as include in base pay. Okay, and then again, the pay period rate times eligible earnings. This is going to do something very similar, and it's going to divide those hours out only to pay codes that have been selected to include in PTO accruals. That setup is on the pay code side as well. Okay, these 3 rates times hours worked base hours and eligible earnings. These differ from the other 2 in that they will allow an accelerated accrual schedule. So the more hours a person works for these, the faster they will accrue time. The same holds true, the lesser amount of hours, the lesser amount of time accrued. Okay, so whatever the appropriate calculation method based on the plan the employee or the employer is trying to set up. Okay, now if we do have one of the pay period rate times, the accelerated schedules, the pay period limit comes into play. This is going to represent the total number of hours that a person can accrue in one single pay period. So it is a limiter. So if we enter in 10 hours here, then no matter how many hours a person works for any of these, they will never accrue more than 10 hours a pay period. Okay. Now this is also in effect if you select the pay period rate or eligible total hours. So if you are not using one of the accelerated calculation methods, then enter a value here that is going to be high enough that it will not impede the hours granted to a person as appropriate. Okay, so if we have something like pay period rate, just make sure we've got something like 25 or greater so that we won't artificially limit what somebody can calculate during the process. Okay, annual carryover hours, that is going to be the total number of unused hours that can be carried over from one year to another or one plan period to another. Okay, that can be whatever they want it to be. Maybe it's 20 hours. Okay, total carryover hours. This actually represents the total number of hours that any one person can ever have at the highest level. Okay, so the way we are going to calculate that is when you have completed the length of service, we are going to take the greatest eligible hours for the highest tier and add the annual carryover hours to it. And that will be your total carryover hours. So let's just say that the total eligible hours at the highest level is going to be 160. We'll take that 160, add a potential 20 hours that they could carry over, and the total carryover hours is going to be 180. Okay. Plan period, that is going to either be the calendar year, Jan 1, or the anniversary of their hire. That will determine when this plan rolls over and does the carryover calculations. Okay, external plan code, if you are using a third-party clock or something such like that, you can add in the external plan code so that imports know what's happening. Okay, otherwise you can leave that alone. Pay code, this is where you will again link the plan to an existing pay code. So let's just say holiday pay 6. Okay, whenever you give hours to holiday pay 6, then those hours are going to be subtracted from any accrued hours for this plan. Okay, and finally we come over to the length of service in days. So this is where you are going to put in the tier levels for the age of their employment. So from day 1 to, let's say, day 365 perhaps, maybe they accrue 20 hours, okay? So that is going to be the first tier. The second tier would be 366, that's 266, 366 to maybe it's going to be 750, whatever that is. Maybe they get 40 hours, but so on and so forth. 751 to 1066, they get 80 hours. Okay? And then 1067 for the last level to 9999, the remainder of their employment to retirement, maybe they get 100 hours. Whatever that plan is based on the description. But this is going to represent the tiers for the length of service. And of course, the system is going to assign an employee to a specific tier based on their original hire date or the secondary hire date if they've been terminated and re-added. Okay, that's it. So once you are finished with this information, click Insert, and that plan will then be listed here for you to apply to an employee. Okay, the client can then add any other additional plans that they need. Okay, once you have plans in place, we can go back to the employees. And we can go to their management tab and add them here to the employee record. So clicking on Add New Record, the plan code, select the PTO plan from the list in the company, whether or not it's active for this employee. The start and the accrual date will be next. Okay, the start date is going to be whenever you want that plan to start for the employee. Generally, the client companies choose the beginning of the year, which is just fine, but they can do whatever date that they wish. If they put in a start date for the future, then it will not accrue until that date is reached. The accrual date, to start off with, have the client put in the same date that they used for the start date. The system is going to update this every time the payroll is run and the accruals are calculated. So this needs to be just mirrored to start with, and the system will take over from there. Okay? Accrued, current, and taken. Accrued is going to represent the total number of hours that an employee has accrued in the year, in the period. The current is not going to represent the current values remaining. The current is going to show the number of hours accrued the last time the payroll was run. And then the taken is going to represent the number of hours taken against this plan. So on the main screen and on reports, when we see the available hours, the calculation is going to be done by taking the accrued hours and subtracting the taken hours. And that's it. So the employees and employers can come back in here and look at the data as they need to. For clients who are bringing on new client companies and they already have accrual data, then you can simply add in the number of hours accrued for the year as well as any taken, and the system will take up from there. That's it. Click Insert, and you're done. Okay? So that is attendance in a nutshell. Okay, and finally, we'll go to payroll. So walk through each of the payroll steps: setup, time entry, process, print paychecks to start with. Payroll setup allows them to select the appropriate payroll groups that they want to pay. They can select all of them or one of them or any combination thereof. They will see the prior pay period that was given. They can either click on the advanced dates to move that data or move the appropriate dates to the current pay period, or they can click in the spots to fill that data in themselves. So once they have the plan periods, the start and end date for this payroll in place, they will move to the pay period. Dropping this list box down, they will then be able to select the appropriate pay period for the payroll that they are running, standard 1 through 5. We also have 2 supplemental pay periods that will not advance the number. Pay period include bank deposits and supplemental with no bank deposits. If they select the supplemental include bank deposits, then anybody who normally gets a direct deposit will do so again here. If they select no bank deposits, then this is going to be a one-time override where the employees who normally get a direct deposit will get a hard copy check. Okay? And then we have holiday period in the hours, or holiday hours in the period. If you put in a number here, like 8, maybe there were 8 holiday hours in this pay period. This 8 hours will then be given as a holiday pay code to each individual in the payroll and reduce their regular pay by 8 hours. Again, this is going to be uniform for all employees within the payroll cycle. So if there are people who do not have eligibility for these holiday hours, do not put this in, grant those holiday hours during the dynamic time entry. Once the information has been input, save changes, and to start with, for a fresh payroll, that will immediately take us to the time entry. In the case of an edit, it will just leave us here and we can click on the time entry button. And now we have the dynamic timesheet. So for this area, fill in the appropriate hourly unit amount or flat amount to each pay and or deduction that you have for each individual. Once this information is input, click Save Changes, and we can go beyond entering time in on the grid page here and click on a person's name to go to the timesheet transaction. Excuse me. This will allow us to add any pay codes that do not appear on the grid itself by clicking on Add New Record. You can select a check number for multiple checks. The date range is going to automatically default to the last day of the pay period. The pay code, select the pay code or the deduction from this list here. Okay. Hours or units, that will then calculate appropriately. And if that's all you need to do, click Insert. This page is also going to be used for any and all labor distribution. So once this information is given, you will be able to redistribute to a different job code. Okay, you will be able to distribute work shifts. You'll be able to distribute to multiple departments and the associated location. You will also be able to select client and project here if the client company is doing certified payrolls. Okay. Now pay attention to the status because we have an active, inactive, or one time. If the status is set at active and the payroll is run, this pay element is going to be a recurring pay code and will show up every time the payroll is started. So anytime you add a pay code here, by and large, make sure that you have the client enter it in as a one-time pay code unless they want to have this reoccur every time the payroll starts. Okay? Clicking Insert, that will then apply this pay code here. Now, in the instance that a client is doing certified payrolls, instruct them that they will be entering in their hours by day. Okay, so they would change the date of the default here to represent the day that was being entered. So let's just say the 13th was a Monday. They can leave this here, add the regular pay code, all of the units, everything that needed to be done here. They will then select the client and the project that they worked on for that day. Okay, they will insert, go back to this page, enter in a date of the 14th for Tuesday, regular pay code or whatever it is that they're giving, the hours, any labor distribution here, client and project that they worked on for that day, so on and so forth. So ultimately, they would have at least five different pay codes representing the client and the project that they worked on for that day. Okay, that will then track the distributed labor through the payroll process. They will then be able to get that data from one of the reports in the reports area, including the labor cost report and the certified payroll report. Okay. Over to the right, we have the check override. So each one of these, by clicking on the checkbox and opening up these fields, these will allow you to make a one-time monetary override to federal, state taxes, local taxes, Fund 1, Fund 2, or the non-residence tax itself. Okay, just enter that in and click Update. Okay, scheduled deductions. This is going to show all deductions that have a dollar value for the employee. You'll see the status here. Both of these are inactive, but if they were active, they would say so in green, and you can enter in an amount to override right here. Now, the only deductions that will show up in this list to be overridden are going to be flat dollar deductions, and this will be a one-time event. Save changes, and then that will flow through to the payroll process. Okay. Now, always remember to tell the clients that they must save any data that they entered on the grid screen before they click on a person's name to go to timesheet transaction. If they don't, whenever they enter the timesheet transaction page, any unsaved data on this screen is going to be lost, and they'll have to do it again. Okay. They have the option to export this screen here to Excel and Word so that they can use that as a timesheet page. And they also have the ability to click the report here so that they can get the timesheet transaction report and verify all the information that's been entered. Okay. Once time entry has been completed, we'll go to the process page, entering in the paycheck date. You will see the supplemental pay period we selected, as well as the date ranges that we entered in previously. Click the Run button to process the gross to nets, and then show them each report and what they do. Okay? Have them review all of these reports, the summary, one line gross to net. The detail is everything processed in the payroll and the payables so that they can see any payable check or tax payment to be created based on this. Okay? Have them review all of this information. They can, of course, go back to any steps previously to make changes. If they do make changes, they would simply need to come back to the screen and press the Run button again. Okay? Once the payroll has been reviewed and approved, they can click the Approve button here and finish off the payroll itself. Okay, phase 2 complete. That will now take us to the Print Paycheck screen, where we can select a specific check stock, check on the top, check on the bottom, check on the top enterprise and company, or if they have logos, they can add those in there. They can also create or choose a separate sort order. By default, it's going to be paycheck amount last name, but they can choose any of the other sort orders that we have here and just click Print, and that will then print the checks for them. Okay? They can click to export this to PDF and print everything out, either to regular white paper for a direct deposit advice or to their check printer if they have hard copy checks. And that is the payroll process in a nutshell, as you know. Okay. One thing to be aware of, if a client has already gone through the setup and the time entry process, if they return to the setup page and change the date range here, that change does not retroactively change the date for the pay codes entered under the time entry screen. Okay, so if the change made here makes any of those pay codes fall outside of the start and the end date range, those pay codes will not be calculated. So one common occurrence is for a client to make changes to the dates here, run the payroll, and they don't see anybody, or they're missing certain individuals. When you go and look, you'll generally see that they've made a change to the dates here, but did not affect the same changes in time entry, and it has caused the pay codes in time entry to be out of range. Okay, so if ever have a client know that if ever a change is made here, they will need to adjust in the time entry by either removing the hours and putting them back in, or they can click on each individual pay code and modify the date range there. But those dates must fall within the start and the end date of the current period. Okay. Now, once the once the payroll process has been explained, next we go to void checks. Voiding checks is very simple, very self-explanatory. They can select an employee from the list here or search in the screen. By clicking on a person's name, it's going to bring up a list of all of the eligible voids that can be done. Okay, so they will be able to see those voids here, click on edit, and they will be able to get the detailed information to verify that the check that they're looking at is the one that they want to void. When they have successfully or sufficiently satisfied themselves that that is what they want to do, clicking on the X will then void the record in question. Okay, on-demand checks. And let me close some of these windows. On-demand checks. We have two functions for an on-demand check. One is an off-cycle paycheck. The second is going to be year-to-date data. Okay, for an off-cycle paycheck, select a person from the list, enter in any earning code that you wish to give them, whatever that may be, the number of hours or the dollars to be given, and just continue that process until all of the pay codes are done. Okay, over under withholdings, they will see all of the taxes that they are currently eligible for based on their setup. So there are two ways to handle this. You can, one, leave everything blank and let the system auto-calculate based on the current tax tables and their setup. Okay, or you can override these and enter the values in yourself. If you override one, you will need to override them all, because just putting in something for one of these codes, if the rest of them are left blank, they're viewed and recorded as zeros when you compute this item. So if you override one, you must enter the value in for all of them, or just leave them blank and let the system calculate it for you. Deductions, select the appropriate deduction that you want on this check, and also put in the dollar value for that deduction here. Okay, up top there is going to be prior period adjustment. Really, this is prior year adjustment. This should be clicked when doing or when creating a payment or a record for a prior year when you have already started a new year. That will ensure that the data that's going to be calculated here is not included in the current year's accumulators. Okay, otherwise do not check that. You have the ability to see the check number here, as well as change the check date. So create your appropriate check date here, and then we can compute, calculate the taxes, click print, and then that's going to produce our check. Okay, once the checks are printed or the check is printed, we can export this to PDF and print it out to our check printer. Once that's completed, click the confirm button, and that will then finish the process. Okay. Now, another method for another function of the on-demand check is going to be year-to-dates. Basically the same process, selecting an employee, but what we want to do here is have a specific pay code set up, something like gross wages. I don't know if we have anything in this company. It does not look like it. But you want to have something like gross wages as a flat dollar amount. Okay, select that item, and then for every quarter, we want to enter in the gross pay for that quarter. Okay, whatever that's going to be. Once that's in place, we want to enter in the quarter total for all of the taxes paid by that person. The same thing for their deductions. List the deductions and put the quarter value for each one of them here. Okay, at the bottom, we want to make sure that the date is sufficiently within the quarter that we are trying to capture. Okay, so again, generally we want to have one on-demand check for year-to-date data for each completed quarter. Now, the clients can do it payroll by payroll if they want. It just becomes a little more problematic. The rest of the process is the same. Compute, print, create that check, save it to history, and then move on to the next person or the same person and the next quarter. Okay, and that's it. Reprint checks is last. Excuse me. Okay, and you will be able to then pick a specific payroll number, the check format, sort order, and print, and it will reprint any check run that you choose. Okay, feel free to go through clear checks. That's pretty self-explanatory. And utilities. What I always inform them of is going to be downloading microfonts. Clicking on downloading microfonts is going to be required for every box, of course, that is going to print checks. So all they need to do is simply right-click and download the file onto their desktop somewhere, right-click on that file when they've downloaded it, and select the install option so that the operating system will install that in the appropriate fonts file. Once they have that completed, they will see then the red numbers here, representative that they have completed the process successfully. Emailing check stubs. Show them the email check stubs process here so that they can successfully email the check stubs for the employees that they've selected on the payrolls that they've completed. Okay. Check logos and signatures. We talk about how to upload those elements, either by creating a signature in the screen here and saving that, or by selecting the item from their desktop here and then uploading that image. Okay. Briefly go through the quarter end, show them the editing the 941, print form 941, show them the SUTA wages report and export, as well as the close quarter. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time here, but just show them where these are and show them the screen and what they can expect on here. Very simple, all these items, quarter to close date, tax year, save, and done. Okay. Year end, you can do the same thing, show them the menus for create 1099s, edit form 1099, so on and so forth, just so that they know where this is. You don't have to spend a lot of time on it. Let them know that at the end of the year, a detailed year-end procedures document will be emailed to them so that they have all of the instructions that they need to utilize all of these elements. They will be able to see how to make adjustments to their data, as well as how to create their 1099s, their 940s, their W-2s, and all of the associated reports. And that's all. So that will then close out talking about session 2, new hires, employee demographics, events, attendance plans, and payroll process. So at this point, let the client ask questions, ask them if there's anything else that they would like to go over, if there's anything deeper that they want to touch on, and you can go from there. But this concludes the session 2 core functionality.